there something or someplace that when you see it, you only think of one person? Welcome to the Parable Podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk, and I have so many of those types of things. Today, you are going to meet a couple I've gotten to know recently whose parable story has turned into a passion in this season of their life.
Community is so important, and don't wait until something like that happens to try to find community. Allow God to let those people into your life before something like that happens. Because eventually something traumatic is going to happen in everyone's life. And God uses His people to minister to you when those things happen.
Here's my conversation with Greg and Cathy Bufkin. I am so grateful to hear your story today. We have connected over the last couple of months, just talking about podcasting and what that looks like for you and Cathy and your ministry. And I'm grateful to really just sit down and get to know more about you today.
Yeah, thank you. You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity too.
Tell me a little bit about your family. Where do you guys live? What are you passionate about these days?
Greg and I both are retired. I was a teacher for 30 years and retired in 2007, which is the year that Ryan graduated from high school, thankfully.
Yeah.
I was so tired by 2007 that I was ready to hang up the teaching career. So, although I do miss it from time to time, I really do. I miss the children.
Yeah.
I could honestly say in this season of life, my passion, because I have retired in the last 3 years, when I look back, it was work. It was a career, but it was a way to provide for my family, and I did enjoy it, but I wouldn't say that it was purpose. And just in the last, I would say in the last year and a half, I feel like God has given me the purpose that I was looking for. Because, once you retire, especially I think us guys, it can be difficult when work sometimes has become part of your identity. And when that identity is removed, then sometimes there can be a struggle to try to figure out what is it I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. After 4 or 5 years of healing and a time of God restoring us, I felt like God was leading us to a purpose. And so the summer after I retired in early 20, I just sat down over the course of the summer and started writing out basically our story about what that journey looked like from the day that we lost Ryan until that point in time. But I didn't know what to do with it. It was a bit lengthy, and we both knew by that time, 5 years after we lost him, that we wanted to do something to help other parents and the siblings who had lost a brother or sister. We wanted to do something to help them, because knowing what it's like, we didn't want them to have to go through this all by themselves and trying to figure out how to navigate that process, because it's an incredibly difficult process, an incredibly difficult journey to try to go through, especially when you have no experience. Most of the people around you typically haven't been there. There are exceptions. Most churches don't particularly know what to do with it. I've even had several pastors that I've interviewed along the way to tell me they have no idea what to do or say.
Yeah.
So we felt like there was a disconnect between the survivors and those who were on the outside looking in. And so we wanted to find a way to bridge that disconnect and give folks insight as to what that grief journey really looks like and the impact that it has on your life, and to be able to give them some tools to equip them for coming alongside and ministering to those survivors. But as we've gone along, God also has basically about 7 or 8 months ago told us to take a pause, which was about a 2 or 3 month long pause. And I struggled with that because I thought, wow, we're just getting momentum, because we launched in November of 20 or 21. But I felt like if that's what God was telling me to do, I needed to honor that, whether I understood it or not. And the other aspect of it was to pivot. And so I was like, what in the world does that even mean? And what we discovered is that God was leading us in a different direction to include the survivors as well, not just those looking in from the outside. And then to consider some technology that I previously was really not even on my radar, which eventually turned into working towards our own podcast. So that's probably a very long way to answer that question, but that is my passion.
It's interesting, Greg, that both you and Cathy, you shared about your identity. I think that's innate to who we are. And whether that is our work or our family, gosh, that plays such a strong role in how we view our passions and our perspective on the world. I'd love to know, how long have you and Greg been married again? And then how did you guys meet each other?
Okay, in March, it will be 46 years.
Wow.
March 12th. So we've been together so long now, we figured nobody else would really want to put up with us. So we'll just hang in there together.
When you first met each other, what was it that drew you to Cathy?
Oh, gosh. These two stories would definitely be coming from two different directions. Asking her this and asking me this.
That's why I love to know.
So we met in the summer of 75. You know, back in the last century, for those young people that are listening. You know, when the dinosaurs were still here and it was the days of black and white, not color. So Cathy and I both at that point were at Francis Marion University here in Florence, and I was a rising junior and she was a rising sophomore. And actually we met through two mutual friends. My best friend had started dating one of her best friends. And so Cathy and Donna and one other young lady had moved to Myrtle Beach for the summer to work. And we went down to the beach one day to visit, just to hang out, because his wife-to-be at the time was off that day. And somehow in the course of just hanging out that day, I met and talked to Cathy. Interestingly enough, we had gone to the same middle school and high school and had never even laid eyes on each other.
Wow.
But when I met her that day, be fair to say that it was, for me, love at first sight.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
There's really no words to describe it, but it wasn't but a week or two before I knew she was the girl. She was literally the girl of my dreams.
Oh.
And I never envisioned that God would have given me somebody like her.
Wow.
So it was amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Well, here we are almost 46 years later, correct?
Yeah.
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 And
hard to believe.
Just to think about everything that you guys have seen as a couple, how you've grown as individuals, your children, your grandchildren. I mean, they teach us so many things, whether we realize it in the moment or not. So, Cathy, I'd love for you to share a little bit about one of your parable stories. I know there's probably so many to choose from. What's one that you'd like to share with us today?
I would have to say that when Whitney was 3, we started trying to have another baby unsuccessfully. I had to have several surgeries, several procedures done. So actually, and we had 2 miscarriages between Whitney and Ryan. There's 8 or 9 years between the two of them. When we finally got pregnant with Ryan, I mean, it was such a miracle moment because we had tried so hard and we had been through so much. In fact, we started the adoption process.
Oh, wow.
And I had started back to school to get my master's in education. And 6 weeks into my course, I just got sick during the middle of one of my classes, thought I had the flu, and went to the doctor, and we found out we were pregnant again. So there was a lot of fear and anxiety with that, because with the first miscarriage I had, we went at 3 months and there was no heartbeat. So we lost that one. So with Ryan, there was a lot of anxiety.
Sure.
So when he finally came, we were just absolutely thrilled beyond words. And it was just such a blessing. And God taught us so much during that process of the hurt, but then the blessing of finally having a baby boy. A baby brother for Whitney, because she just wanted a sibling so badly. It was a real blessing. God just really showed himself through those long months.
What was one of the things as a mom you really enjoyed about either being a mom, watching your children grow up, some of the qualities you loved about them?
Well, first of all, the age difference between the two of them. There was never a moment of jealousy between the two of them. Whitney had waited so long to have a sibling, so she was kind of like the little mom. She was a lot of help, with him. They were very different in personalities, and Whitney was always the reserved, quiet one. She was always a good student. Then when Ryan came along, it was totally the opposite from the very beginning. He was just full of mischief, loved to make you laugh, would do just about anything to get a laugh out of whoever he was around. Very active little fella.
Yeah.
So teaching at the same time and, having the two of them, it was definitely a full-time job. Never a dull moment.
Parenting really it is no joke. Nobody gives you the manual when you leave the hospital, right?
No.
You think as a parent, like you're teaching them, but really like they are teaching us so much. So Greg, I'd love for you to speak into throughout that whole journey of the last 46 years, what parable story of yours really stands out to you, and what lessons has God taught you through that?
The lessons that God's taught me through all of this, it could fill some volumes. God has drawn me closer to Him through our marriage because I saw Him in her when we met. She was a godly young lady, and she was really good for me. When you get married and you step into that new role of responsibility, it's a great responsibility. We entered into not just a marriage, but into a covenant, Cathy and God and me. And it was never just the two of us. God was the absolute center and foundation of our relationship from the beginning. Were there times when we weren't really cognizant of that so much? Yeah, absolutely. Because we were young, and sometimes I would say for me, young and dumb. But thankfully, God doesn't ever forget about us. And He is always there guiding us, even when we're not paying that close attention. But God has continually over the years has put different people in my life that have had just an incredible influence as a mentor at just the right time. And He did that for us as a couple in the early days of our marriage. We were involved in a small group, a Bible study group, before Whitney was born. So probably about 78 or 79, so a year or two into our marriage. So we were always surrounded by godly people who were pouring into us. And as we grew older and started having our children, Cathy and I always had a heart for other young couples. And so from some of the earliest days after Whitney was born, we formed our own small groups of young couples. And so we were able to pour into their lives as well. Really and truly, Danielle, I can't really think of a time when we've not been involved in a small group.
Wow.
When I say a small group, for those who are not in church world, these are the kind of people that if you needed someone, you could call them at 3 o'clock in the morning and they would be there, no questions asked.
Yeah.
They're the kind of people who have walked with us on this grief journey by just simply giving us the gift of their presence, who would listen to us when we cried and when we told our stories over and over and over again. They were just patient to listen, and they never judged. They never tried to fix us or to give us advice that wasn't asked for. They simply loved on us. And through all of that, what I've learned about God, and I thought that I knew this, Danielle. I really thought that I knew Him prior to losing Ryan. because I came to Jesus when I was in grade school. So I've had a relationship with him for a very long time, but over the years it's grown a whole lot more personal and intimate, and our friendship has grown. So I always knew God was good. But when your faith gets tested, and believe me, when you go through something like the loss of a child, I don't care what anybody says, your faith gets tested in a significant way. And what we learned about God is that he is far beyond my concept of what I had previously defined as good. I can remember, I've told people this so many times, you would understand this. If you are a believer, you probably understand this. But unless you've been in a situation where you suddenly were face to face with a very traumatic event, it might not have ever been tried to this point. But I can remember when I got off that phone call that we received to tell us that we had lost Ryan, I can remember my greatest concern at that point was, how in the world am I going to tell Cathy about this?
Yeah.
Because she was up in the room. I had come down to get coffee. And on the way up to the room, I'm just like, God, how am I going to do this? I don't think I can do this. I hear a voice behind me, and this guy says, "Excuse me, sir, I couldn't help but overhear your phone call." And I'm a Christian man, and I just wondered, would it be okay if I prayed for you? He didn't know me. We had never met. It's there in the hallway and the lobby of the hotel. So he did. And I met Cathy on the stairwell and shared that story. So we had to pack up really quick.
Yeah.
We were with friends. Thankfully, God had put friends there with us for that weekend. On the way home, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to drive home because it was about a 4-hour drive. And, we're both in shock. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But it was so incredibly amazing. When we got in the car, it cannot be explained in human terms, but it's what Scripture says, that in describing the peace that God gives us, it's the peace that absolutely defies human understanding. Yeah. And I had that peace on that drive home. Otherwise, I don't think we would have made it home. I just remember thinking, I should not have this kind of peace. We just lost our son. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But I knew in that moment that God was there in that vehicle with us in a way that I had never experienced him before.
Well, Greg, I believe that there's so many elements, so many facets to our story. I mean, just right there of the way that our Father fathers us, where you were in a hotel lobby getting coffee and you received the news that your son has passed. And a stranger has the courage and the confidence to say, "Can I pray for you right now?" I mean, right there, that is only God.
That's a God thing. Yeah. Absolutely. It's so cool how he places people strategically like that throughout our lives. And that's certainly not the last time that's happened. There have been many other instances like that along the way, Danielle. It's like we've told people when we've shared our story that when you lose a child, there really are no words to describe how unthinkable a loss it is. But when you add a layer to it of suicide, it just, the level of trauma that it adds is off the chart. And you wonder, are we going to be able to live through this? And do we even want to? Yeah. Because we just wanted to go and be with Ryan.
Yeah.
Because we knew that he was in heaven. I mean, we knew that Ryan had trusted Jesus when he was young. And it's so incredibly thankful that he did when he was young. God has just met us in so many ways.
Greg, I just found some stuff that you wrote online. And so you had said, it's okay to not be okay for a while, but it's not okay to stay not okay. What does that sentence mean for you? Because I'm sure you've experienced all of that sentence.
Yeah, I have, and Cathy and I have, absolutely. When I say it's okay not to be okay, what I mean by that is that I think that there sometimes can be an unrealistic expectation that because you are an apprentice or a follower of Jesus, that you're just going to be okay no matter what. And people forget that Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble.
Yeah.
But be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. Well, he wasn't kidding when he said, in this world you will have trouble. If you haven't experienced it, I'm not sure what planet you're living on. But trouble can come in all kinds of shapes and situations. And when a parent's worst fear comes true. You're not okay. I don't care how you look on the outside. There is nothing okay about you, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. There are some interesting studies that are available that show just what the impact is on people who have lost a child. And it goes far beyond what most people see, and that is the emotional part of it. They see us crying. They see that we're sad. Of course, they lost their child. That's a sad situation. And what they don't realize is that beyond those sad-looking emotions on our faces, you feel like you are in a black hole. It feels like you become somewhat paralyzed. And I mean paralyzed to do just about anything that previously was so simple, like making decisions about anything. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how simple it is, it's just difficult to even think about making a decision. And I can't really define why. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact. And we've talked to so many other people who say almost the same words. You feel like you're in a state of almost suspended animation, and that the world continues to move forward, but you're frozen in time. Mm. And it becomes the perspective of before and after. Your life is forever defined by that moment, prior to that moment and after that moment. So we want people to understand, both who are on the outside looking in and those who are surviving in a fresh season of grief, or even if it's been a while, but they feel stuck. Mm-hmm. It's okay not to be okay for a while, but it's not okay to stay there, because even though there are no right and wrong ways to grieve, there certainly are healthy and unhealthy ways to grieve. Mm-hmm. And if you feel stuck, then it might be time for some intervention through counseling, maybe seeing a family doctor, because you may be, as happened to me, I was diagnosed with clinical depression about 5 or 6 months after we lost Ryan. And I was in that world. One of the products that I promoted was an antidepressant. And I didn't recognize the symptoms in myself. So I say that to encourage people who may be hesitant to go to a counselor. Please do. There is no shame in it. I mean, they're there for a purpose. If you had a physical ailment, in all likelihood, you would go to a medical doctor. Yeah. So there's no shame in going to a counselor whatsoever. No shame in taking antidepressants. You may not have to stay on it for some chronic period of time, but maybe for a short period of time, just to help.
Greg, thank you for encouraging us through that. I think for a long time, I thought therapy is just for those people who really need it. And I had a therapist this year, and it was so helpful to me, because I think it's like if your car is broken, or if your car is like even just needs a tune-up, you go get it taken care of, right? So it's just that same mindset. So,
but don't you think, Danielle, just to add some more perspective to that, is I think sometimes, and it's so unfortunate, in the Christian community, I think sometimes there is the perspective, you need to pray your way out of this.
Yes.
You need to read your Bible more often. You need to do this and you need to do that. Yes, I do believe that we should take all of that to God and talk to Him about that in prayer. But if you had a blood pressure reading that was in the danger zone, would you go to a medical doctor to try to get that down, because you are at very high risk of stroke at that point? Or would you stay at home and just simply ask God to fix it for you, when God may be saying, you've got a family physician that's a resource to you. Why don't you get in your car and go to that physician and let he or she give you some medication that would help? That's how I'm offering to help you. Why do we have such a hard time with mental illness in the Christian community? Illness is illness, whether it's your brain or whether it's your liver or your kidneys or whatever. That's something that I believe very passionately about.
You need to say it for the people in the back, Greg. I hear you. I just think, And this is why I think is so great. I think we're building like a framework and a language around what mental health is, you know.
Absolutely.
I think that is so helpful to us, that it doesn't have to be scary. It does not have to be shameful. We all struggle with our mental health, no matter what our traumatic situations or not even traumatic situations, because we are sinful people. We live in a society where there is other broken people around us. And yeah, it's going to be hard. Yeah, just having that safe space to talk.
One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about that is that Ryan battled with depression. Mm-hmm. Depression and anxiety. He had some OCD issues. But to Ryan's credit, he was seeing a psychiatrist, a family physician, and a counselor for that. So he was doing all the right things, and there was no shame in it. And there's no shame on our part that that was the case for him. Some of us struggle with cholesterol issues, and some of us struggle with other issues. But God wants to be the healer of that too, and God wants us to take responsibility in that area and take advantage of the resources that He's provided.
Amen. I would love for you to speak to those moms out there that you already experienced such loss between Whitney and Ryan's births. And, you know, to have that, you wanted that baby boy, to have that son in your life, and then him just gone one day. How would you encourage moms as they are walking through grief?
Well, you know, of course, grief is a different process for every individual.
Yeah.
I think especially for moms, losing a child is an indescribable pain. And Ryan was so full of life and had just had, he and his wife had just had a baby girl. So losing him was just the most devastating experience. And as the years have gone by, of course, the pain is not quite as acute.
Sure.
There are still days that are very sad, days that I truly, truly miss him so much. And I think there's a bond between mother and son, kind of like the bond between a father and a daughter, that is just always there.
Yeah.
It's just always there. And he was like me in so many ways, whereas Whitney is more like her dad. He and I shared a love of music and movies and things like that. But it's like we were told from the very beginning, there's no right way to grieve. There's a healthy and an unhealthy way to grieve. And so we tried from the very beginning for it to be a healthy grieving process. We immediately sought counsel from a Christian counselor who is a friend of ours. As it turns out, he had also counseled Ryan for a while before Ryan passed away. So that was very helpful. And we did that probably up until maybe 3 years ago. So 4 years in, we were still going to counseling. One of the main things that helped us so much was that we had a community, a small group of close friends that we were already involved with. And when Ryan passed away, honestly, I don't know what we would have done had we not had them, had God not put them in our lives to begin with. We try to share with people. Community is so important, and don't wait until something like that happens to try to find community. Allow God to let those people into your life before something like that happens. Because eventually something traumatic is going to happen in everyone's life. And God uses His people to minister to you when those things happen. We had a small group of friends who, one of them had lost their son years ago. So they could relate to us and minister to us because they could honestly say, we know what you're going through.
Yeah.
And the other friends were just there to listen and just to give us hugs. And it made such a huge difference. And we are all still very close. That has been a real blessing.
Yeah. grief is different for everyone. There is no cookie cutter process or action steps that you can take. And you're right, community is incredibly important. And we're all going to face something where we need to be pulled back up by somebody else because we just can't do it on our own. So
exactly.
Thank you for speaking into that. Greg, you talked about that passion that you had that has kind of adjusted over the course of your life. I'd love for you to speak into how your passion has kind of, after Ryan's passing, what that has birthed with, your podcast and also the Empty Chair endeavor. That's quite amazing where God has shifted you guys.
Yeah, and that's all him, Danielle. We were the willing party, but God's the one who gave us that vision and that desire, what started out with a desire to help other people. Because we never had really known anyone very closely who had lost a child. Yes, we knew people who had, but we weren't in close relationships with them. So I really didn't know. We didn't know the impact that it had had on their lives until it happened to us. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to help, but God needed to give us time to get some healing under our belts, as it were.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency to want to take things and run with it. And I can find myself running ahead of God because he'll certainly let you do that. And sometimes when we do that, we have a tendency to trip and fall, or we will miss something that seems very obvious to other people. And to ourselves, in retrospect. Mm-hmm. So God gave us basically about 5 years into the journey before it felt like we were ready enough to start doing something. Mm-hmm. I think I'd mentioned earlier, it started with me sitting down and writing. And then we just started praying, God, what you want us to do with it? The Empty Chair endeavor was born out of that, Danielle, but it was also born out of the fact that two other couples who were friends of ours that we've known for a long time, they also lost a child. And they were all about the same age. Ryan was 26. The other boy was 26 and the young lady was 28. Mm-hmm. And so we all had a shared passion as we started having conversations together about wanting to help other people.
Yeah.
And so we started meeting together and just meeting together, praying about it and just asking God, what do you want us to do with this? What shape is it supposed to take? What's it supposed to look like? How do we do this?
Yeah.
And from those meetings, the Empty Chair endeavor was born out of that, and we launched that ministry in November of 21. As I had mentioned earlier, our initial purpose, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. We discovered there are a lot of grief ministries that already were in existence, and some were doing it really well. I think about Nothing is Wasted Ministries, led by and founded by Davy Blackburn. I mean, they do it so incredibly well and have so many resources. Davy brings to the table his own unbelievable loss of his wife and unborn child. Our initial focus was going to be on people who were on the outside looking in to help prepare and equip them for effective ministry. So I started right after the beginning of the year in 22. I started meeting together with local pastors, and I met with local civic groups just to share our story and just to make them aware that there was a ministry out there that was focused on these particular aspects of grief. And along the way, God showed us that we could actually do both. We could focus on those who are surviving and grieving, as well as those who are on the outside looking in. And so that began to take shape over the course of the year, and then that summer is when Davy Blackburn had invited us to do a podcast. Mm-hmm. And as a result of Cathy and I doing that podcast, we had two families to contact us directly because they wanted to talk with someone who had been through what they were now going through. Yeah. And they wanted to find out more about what we were doing. And so it was like, the proverbial light bulb came on, and I thought, okay, this is why God asked us to pause, because I was busy meeting with those civic groups. I was busy meeting with the pastors, but busyness doesn't always equate to effectiveness.
Yes.
And so I think that was why God asked us to take a pause and look to him for some clarity. And that's when we started moving towards establishing all that needed to be done, which was a lot of education on my part
Yeah.
about the whole world of broadcasting through a podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm not a real tech savvy guy, so the learning curve has been a rather lengthy one. In this season of life, I think it's probably even a little more challenging to teach the old dogs new tricks.
Well, Greg, I'm so proud of you. Like, again, yes, technology can be a barrier, but I think what I see in you and Cathy's heart and what we've heard through what you shared today is this desire for community and for people to just have a safe space to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think that you both bring that. I feel very safe with you and having never met you. And I think that that is the beauty of all that you're doing. And sometimes when we do we do this? God says, yeah, I'm going to give you the tools and we're just going to keep pressing into it. And I'm grateful that you are utilizing the podcasting space and wherever else you're connecting with people in such a way to provide hope. And so thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. That's very encouraging.
Greg, if people wanted to get connected to you, Cathy, or all of your opportunities, how can they do that?
Well, probably the easiest way would be to email us, hope@emptychairendeavor.com. They can go to our website, emptychairendeavor.com, and there is a link there. There's also a link to our podcast there. We have a Facebook private group page. At this point, Danielle, that's probably the best way to get in touch with us. Please contact us and let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know what aspects of grief you particularly need some insight about and maybe just some encouragement about.
I think it's so important to honor Ryan's life. What's one way that you still love to celebrate him and remember him often?
You know, it's been such a blessing to have the friends that we have, because even though some of them did not know Ryan personally, one couple in particular, Ryan died in October of 2015 and they did not become a part of our group until the following February. So they had not met Ryan like the other couples had, but they will tell you today that they feel like they know him. They feel like he's the son they never had because we have shared so many stories with them. We've laughed with them about stories about Ryan because he was such a funny guy. But even today, at the beginning of every month, they go and put fresh flowers on Ryan's grave. And they never even knew him. So things like that just really, they ask us things about him. They want to know about him. They want to know stories. So the first anniversary of when Ryan passed away would have been October 2016. The group of friends actually bought a tree, a sugar maple tree, and they wanted us to plant it in the backyard, and we did, and we put little white lights on that tree, and we turn it on every night. Every night without fail, we turn that tree on, and they have been able to watch it grow like we have. Yeah. In fact, this past December, we had to put extra lights on it because it's growing so much. And it's a sugar maple, so it grows very slowly, but it's grown enough that we had to put more lights on it. Just special things like that mean so much to know that people still remember and, they want to talk about him. They want to ask us questions about him. Because a lot of people, I think when you lose a child, it's very normal for others to shy away from that because they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to hurt your feelings. Yeah. But what they don't understand is that you want to talk about your child. Yeah. You want them to remember, and you want to be able to share with them about your child. Yeah. Gosh, thank you so much for sharing your heart today and just letting us see what it is like from a mom's perspective and in the beauty that God still gives you in community, and that you can look at that sugar maple every night. I think that is so special. So thank you for sharing. Every night. Well, Greg, Cathy, thank you so much for being on the Parable Podcast. Oh, it's been an absolute delight and pleasure, and we are so appreciative that you would have us, Danielle.
Wow, 46 years of marriage. I am grateful to have gotten to know Greg and Cathy a little bit over the last couple of months, and I'm just expectant and hopeful for all the people that they're going to continue to bless and encourage and help in their ministry and through their podcast. So to connect with Cathy or Greg, simply visit daniellezapchenk.com, and here are 2 takeaway questions from our time with the Bufkins. Number 1, write a list of people that are in your life that are your go-tos, people that would answer the phone at 2 a.m. or come be with you at a moment's notice. Look over it and decide, does this list work? Is there space to add someone new or maybe take someone off? Our community matters and we need to invest in it. Number 2, how are you doing really? Are you struggling right now? And maybe you're not feeling okay. Like Greg said, it's okay to be there, but not to stay in that feeling forever. So I want you to feel free to process through that right now. Maybe that's just praying to God, journaling. Maybe it's time to talk with a friend, someone who's safe in your life that you can really chat and they can listen. Or maybe it's finding a great counselor or a therapist. Thank you so much for listening. You can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether on Apple, Spotify, or even on YouTube. Share this podcast with a friend. It is always a great conversation starter. And thanks so much to my technical producer of a husband, Eric, for editing this podcast. That is going to do it for today. I'm grateful that you took time to spend it with me. Remember, your parable, it showcases how you are always okay in His arms. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.